Here are the top stories coming up on Eyewitness News.
At 6 o'clock every weeknight, almost 600,000 viewers are watching one of Washington's 3 news programs. What they're seeing on those shows is a picture of authority and organization. But for my money, they are really missing the best show of all. It's a show that features this dazzling but obscure cast of characters. Director Ernie Bauer, who fearlessly courts ulcers with every news show. Desk supervisor Mark Seeger, who frantically fights sleep with every passing hour. Executive producer John Baker, who flamboyantly snatches victory from the jaws of defeat, sometimes. And Jim Snyder, vice president for news, whose very scowl has caused grown men and women to tremble. You'll meet these and more on That's News to Me.
That's News to Me, a personal look behind the scenes in the WTOP News Department. Here is Eyewitness News correspondent Henry Tenenbaum.
Good morning. It's 7 a.m. in the WTOP newsroom, and the debris of yesterday's news is strewn about like the bones after a banquet, chewed up and discarded. The film clips which captured yesterday's news stories are now just strips of cellulose reflecting past events. Most will be filed and forgotten. But today's news is already chattering for attention. It pours in from teletypes and news releases and phone calls. This deluge of data descends upon the sleepy head of desk supervisor Mark Seeger. He organizes the information into assignments for reporters and cameramen. Now, in the early morning, Seeger's somnambulistic style doesn't exactly inspire excitement. But second only to the coffee machine, it is Seeger's desk where reporters drift as they arrive every morning.
Social security thing, is that now in Steve's lap?
Now, I'll tell you something. In his heart, every reporter knows that there are 2 kinds of stories. There are the good, hard-breaking stories, and there are the stories you've got to cover. Mark Seeger is a very important person. He decides whether you get to cover the prison riot or the groundbreaking.
2 days in a row, I tell all these dumb stories.
Oh, come on, Susan. What do you want to do?
I want to do it. I want a decent story.
Let's go down and break in the White House.
They get from Seeger. Most like to cover the big breaking stories, but often find themselves on an assignment based only on a few promising words in a news release, an ambiguous scrap of newspaper or wire copy, a cryptic phone call, or perhaps a cacophonous bit of chatter on the police radio.
Between Old Georgetown Road and Rockville Pike, automobile accident.
Anyhow, Britt's sick, so that leaves us with the minicam and 3 crews, which is wonderful.
And Susan's going
And a whole bunch of stories that we've got to do. Well, that's a fairly good story.
Seeger is closely supervised by the brass, like Assistant News Director Rich Adams. I don't envy Seeger. He's supposed to be a combination drill sergeant, dispatcher, and fortune teller. Somehow, he always has to have a reporter and cameraman at the right place at the right time. On a typical day, he may have 20 possible stories, 6 cameramen, 8 reporters, and an upset stomach. Now, what goes on inside Broadcast House is hard enough, but it's out on the street that the news is made. We're going to watch a report by correspondent Mike Buchanan. After watching the report, we'll see how he put it together. It's called The Jane Doe Mystery.
2 youngsters walking through the North Englewood playground just off Sheriff Road discovered the woman's body. The medical examiner's report says the victim drowned, but homicide detectives say without the woman's name, their investigation is at a dead end. They can't determine whether the woman died accidentally or was murdered.
Well, the body was down here in this little side stream off the main stream. It was lying face up. She had no clothes on except for her shoes. And the body was somewhat bloated and floating.
What does the medical examiner put on it as far as how long she was dead?
10 to 15 days. According to the medical examiner, it appears to be a drowning. Of course, at the time we found her, the stream was extremely shallow.
About how deep?
Than now. Well, you could see the bottom clearly, just a few inches deep. Enough to support the body, but that's all.
But not enough to drown it.
Well, you'd have to make an effort.
The victim was a black woman, 22 to 25 years old, black hair, brown eyes, about 5'5", 110 pounds. She had a large space between her front teeth. The woman was nude except for a pair of white platform shoes and her jewelry. Homicide detective Dave Hatfield is assigned to the case.
Dave, let's take a look at this jewelry, and why don't you give us a rundown on it?
Okay, first is going to be a sterling silver wedding band. It's going to have slashes all over the facing of it.
No inscription?
No, sir, no inscription. This is a small, just pinky ring, sterling silver also. Again, no inscriptions.
This is generally, what, dime store jewelry?
Right.
No way to trace it?
No, sir. No inscriptions whatsoever. Nothing.
In the watch?
No. The watch is a Timex electric, battery operated, with a off-white leather band.
Police say they're not sure whether it was an accidental death or a homicide. But detectives do say that each day that passes without someone identifying the woman, they become more suspicious. This is Mike Buchanan, Eyewitness News in Prince George's County.
Now, that report ran about 2 minutes on the air, but for Mike Buchanan, it took the better part of the day to put it together. It's his story, and I'm going to let him tell it.
Probably the most exciting part of the job, because when you walk in the office, you never know what you're going to do or where you're going to go. What I start is on the telephone. I just start making the rounds, calling the police department, looking for something. On a story that you develop by phone, most of the time, but by the time you leave the office, you know most of the facts.
The body was found about 4 face up in the water, and this is August 13th. Okay, sounds like a real mystery.
Of course, the next step is you pick up a cameraman. Now, that can make or break your day right there. Because this cameraman, you're probably going to spend the next 6 hours with. And you hope like heck he had a good night. If not, it can be a long day.
Okay, where are we going, Mike?
It's CBI, Criminal Bureau of Investigation, Prince George's County. Today it was Klein. Klein's a reserve police officer himself. We're going out on a police story. That's a strike in the right direction anyway. Klein's probably one of the best cameramen here. When we arrive at the scene, my job is primarily public relations. I try and, make these guys at ease that we're going to talk to, explain the situation to them, and secondly, I'm looking for an angle on that story.
Case handling.
While I'm inside talking, Klein's outside playing pack mule. He loads up the camera gear, sound gear, lights. He puts them all in a golf bag and looks like he's, going to tee off. And here's where probably most people think it's just automatic. The cameraman walks in, you sit down and do an interview. Wrong. This is where Klein does his thing. He's got to set the lights, get the camera angle, get the microphones, test the sound, look at his camera angle, test the lights. This is where he does his thing. And if he doesn't do his thing, we don't have any pictures. And if we don't have any pictures, we don't have any story.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay. Now, the interview is an art in itself. You can sit down and talk to this man or this woman, whoever you're talking to. You may ask 20 questions, get 20 answers, and probably one of those will be used on the air. Klein is acting as a cameraman, but not only is he a cameraman, he at this point becomes a cameraman and a producer. For example, while we were talking to the detective mentioned jewelry, and all of a sudden Klein says, "Hold it right there." And he shifts his angle so he can get a better shot of the jewelry. I think it was probably the first time the detective had ever been interviewed. He was probably more scared to death during that interview than if he was in a running gun battle with 2 bank robbers.
Given a description of the victim as well as the jewelry, and we've sent information out into the news media.
Wasn't a bad interview. He knew the story. He told the facts. He ran it down for us. We probably shot 7 minutes of film, put 45 seconds of it on the air. Okay, after the interview, we know we have 2 things to do. One of them is go to the scene where the body was found, and the second is grab a bite to eat. The street reporter usually eats at a place where you do not need reservations. All you need is about $1.50 and a stomach that can digest grease.
I bet this food is food.
So part of being a reporter is you have to eat on the run, and you also have to be prepared for the mud and the gook. The murder scene was in a park where we must have had to walk probably 100 yards through quicksand. It was just slosh, slosh, slosh. One of those where it takes 2 days for your shoes to dry up. From a visual point of view, we didn't have anything here. We really didn't have anything to show except an empty park, a creek, and mud puddles. If there's a mud puddle, it seems invariably that's where you're going to do your stand-up. This is where you do the summation and you talk to the camera. It's essentially shows the reporters at the scene that we didn't spend the day at the office just on the telephone, that we actually went out and did some legwork and took a look at the scene.
This is Mike Buchanan, Eyewitness News in Prince George's County.
The film processor, a great invention. If everything goes all right, which it does most of the time, 1 hour after you're back in the office, you're ready to edit. This was a simple story, but kind of hard to write because it was full of question marks, because we didn't have any answers. All we've got is questions. You can sit down and compose a masterpiece at the typewriter, but by the time it gets to the editor, in this case Bill Moore, Bill's got his own ideas too on editing, and he may see something that you haven't seen. Klein probably shot 15 minutes worth of film. You've got a script that's, you know, laid out how you want the film, but the film editor, it's his job to make that script and that film match, to come together to tell the story. So you have to adjust your script to the film. Then your script, you know, takes on a different appearance, kind of like a bunch of chickens ran over it.
That's about 1920. It may be too long.
Pushing it, yeah.
You're not kidding, buddy, because we don't have much film.
The biggest problem in editing this piece was the lack of visuals, the fact that we really didn't have that much to show. And so it was Bill Moore's job to try and make it as interesting as possible with a lack of pictures. The story was relatively simple. Nothing extravagant, nothing artsy-craftsy, but it dealt basically with the facts. And being a police reporter, that's what you're dealing with, is facts. It's not a bad job.
The job that I have, it may not be on, you know, a 10 on the status level or something, but what I'm dealing with most every day is a question of life and death. Somebody taking someone else's life and the search for that person. Now you tell me what can be more important than that.
That's news to Mike Buchanan, and that's news to me. We'll be back in a moment. All right, it's afternoon. Reporters have returned from their assignments, settled down at their grimy gray government surplus desks, and now they face the television journalist's ultimate challenge. No, not trying to bang out a brilliant script, rather trying to block out the bedlam in the front of the room. That's something that they don't teach you in journalism school.
Hey, they're repeating it.
Too much area.
Spearman? Eldridge? They're repeating the piece. Do you need to see it?
That bombastically bemused person is executive producer John Baker. His full-time job might best be described as snatching victory from the jaws of defeat.
Hello there.
Sometimes he succeeds.
Jerry, he's here. Hey, Warner, the mile. We got the mile. Coming on TVN. Here he is.
Hello. Baker is supposed to cook up a show from the many ingredients that make up the news. A sprinkling of copy stories from the wire services, a dash of national film stories from the network, and hopefully a large measure of local stories by WTOP reporters. Well, actually, it's more like building a sandcastle with the tide coming in. For example, at 5 o'clock, we usually videotape news stories from the network fed on a closed-circuit TV line. On this day, because of a technical problem, most of them weren't recorded. So, less than 1 hour before airtime, Baker has lost 4 of his scheduled stories.
We lost the recording on CBS, and you know about it now, right?
Does he get annoyed or upset? Well, yes, a little.
Hey, does that hurt your piece? Yeah. All I'm filming, you're all right. Has Gendel's stuff come out yet?
The show is almost illegibly laid out on a big board in the front of the room, but I can't remember it ever actually getting on the air as it was originally blocked out. For one thing, Baker is a congenital optimist. He'll schedule a piece early in the show because he expects it to be a strong news story. Reporters, on the other hand, well, they tend to be professional pessimists.
Well, tell me, what do you got?
The week story. It's on Controller Maryland is doing a PR job, I think. He's going to...
Sue King's piece was scheduled to run at 6:10. After hearing her unenthusiastic appraisal, Baker reschedules it for about 6:30. And a story by Steve Gendel may also have to run lower in the show because his film arrived back at the station late. You want to hear why?
You know what happened as we pulled up?
What?
Hal hears this funny noise in his car.
Yeah?
He says, I better go to the gas station and check. He had a flat tire.
Had a flat
We don't
tire.
have spares. You imagine if we have first go without
We don't
a
have
flat tire?
spares?
Imagine
Why don't we have spares? That's ridiculous.
Ah, another gray hair on Baker's 41-year-old head. While Baker is undergoing the anguish of his chosen profession in the sprawling newsroom, reporters and editors are huddling in small rooms nearby, selecting and cutting film to fill Baker's show. Film is previewed at high speed, and even the most deep-voiced announcers are reduced to a Mickey Mouse-like resonance.
Tomorrow, I'm Susan King, Eyewitness News, at Garfield High School in Prince William County.
I think that's
I'm going to use TVN at 6 o'clock. Okay?
The squeals in the editing booth are a counterpoint to the squawks in the newsroom. It's now approaching airtime, and the anchormen are finishing up their scripts. Using information from the wire services, they write the stories which they will read on the air. As it gets later, typewriters chatter faster. Baker chatters faster.
I wrote that. You did or did not get Fanny Fox?
I got Fanny Fox.
Monitors blare louder. Baker blares louder.
Hello, Warner.
But the loudest sound of all isn't even audible. The clock makes its silent sweep as Baker sweats.
Was that Fanny Fox?
It's ridiculous.
Was there a voicer on there?
Welcome to television.
You're trying to keep a Navy ship.
Yes, welcome to television. It's now 6 o'clock. Anchormen are looking at the camera, viewers are looking at their TV sets, and Ernie Bauer is looking chaos in the face.
First, and don't judge a bread. Disappearance will never be solved.
Take camera 2, Mike. Film set 'em out. Film 1, camera 2. Change 3. Camera 4A, color max. Solve effects. Next is film 4, voiceover half track for Mike 2, Strickland. Film full. Set 'em out.
The calm confidence which we're hoping you see on the set is partly the product of calculated chaos in the so-called control room. The guy trying to keep control is the director, Ernie Bauer. They say good directors are mere mortals, but I'm not convinced. During the news show, Ernie seems almost omnipotent.
Stand by commercial tape 5.
Ernie utters words and people all over the station are doing his bidding. In the bowels of the building, he has them rolling tapes, projecting films, changing slides. In the studio, he has them throwing cues, shifting cameras, reading scripts. And in the control room, he has them punching buttons and twisting dials that determine which pictures we will see, which sounds we will hear, which images will be superimposed on the screen, which cameras will... Oh, why go on? I'm convinced that it can't be done. But every night, Ernie proves me wrong.
Track film 4, take it. Change 3. Need a key in camera 1. Set a key. Film 3, camera 1.
Why is...
Film full.
Forget it.
About 4A, color max.
As if Ernie didn't have enough worries, he also has our articulate producer to contend with.
And that Zoom looked like he was on the rafter.
John Baker is on-the-spot critic and creator. You see, in theory, the show is all laid out on paper in advance. In fact, the order is constantly being changed while the show is on the air. Films come in late, stories run longer or shorter than expected. Executive producer Baker has the unenviable task of making sure that the show flows well and ends on time.
All right, Max on the phone.
Max on the phone.
Gronsky's going to be dead. Killer Gronsky.
During the commercials, he advises the director and the anchor persons about the constant changes which he is making.
Bring down a copy for me. Have them give the copy to the teleprompter man, too.
Meanwhile, our most faithful viewer is watching calmly upstairs. It's the boss, news director Jim Snyder. Of course, he doesn't discriminate. He's also watching channels 4 and 7. Like his counterparts at the other stations, he's trying to figure out whose show is the fairest of them all. Right now, Snyder is sort of smiling. Those of us who work for him have learned to look for those little telltale hints. That smile's a good sign.
10 games out of first place.
Hey, Susan.
Uh-oh, that's a bad sign when a reporter just coming off the air gets called into the office.
I know you were in an editing bind, but that tactic of showing a fellow talking and...
cleverly lull the front runners into a false sense of...
If there's something Snyder doesn't like about a story, he lets us know about it, usually quietly, but a waggle of his intimidating eyebrows carries plenty of weight with us employees. Of course, he doesn't have that same pull with those technological gremlins that occasionally make a news program look like the Hindenburg disaster.
This business is, we all live by a very technical system, and you can have the greatest idea in the world for a story. You can have the finest reporter and the finest cameraman go out and work it, come back and put it together in wonderful fashion. And if a machine breaks down during the show, a tube blows, the wind blows the tower over, or a piece of magnetic tape snaps, the whole thing can go down the drain. And instead of having this wonderful story on here, you have black.
Black, the ultimate sin in television. It happened in this show when a film turned out to be shorter than the director was told it would be. Now, here's what it looked like on the air. Now, here it comes now. Ready?
What happened?
How long is this?
Zero, man.
Hey, how long is this film? I was told it was a minute.
110. Right, is that film 2? 8, 7. Is that film 2?
What, that?
5. Roll 5, yeah. 4, 3. Fade it out and track tape 5.
Boy, that turned out to be a piece of garbage.
It sure did.
Well, quality notwithstanding, length is now getting to be a problem. A reporter's story is running longer than expected, and Baker is worried that as a result the whole show might run beyond its allotted time. That's another deadly sin.
30 seconds? That's marvelous. How long is her film on this piece?
Minutes. And then she got all this lead in.
My God. Gave me 2 minutes worth.
The reporter shall remain nameless. I'm just glad it wasn't me. But the excessive length of that story means that the anchormen will have to wrap up the show very quickly.
Oh, so everyone does it.
As the clock ticks on, as the show runs later, Baker and Bauer calmly keep their wits about them.
That's Eyewitness News. Again,
shut on!
I'll be back at 11. Join us then. For J.C. Hayward and the rest of the Eyewitness News team, I'm Max Robinson. Have a good evening. Well, that wasn't a bad 3-hour show.
Well, Baker is frantically trying to get the 6 o'clock news off the air. Producer Jerry Grossman is trying to figure out how to get the 11 o'clock news on the air. Meanwhile, on a bulletin board across the room, tentative assignments for tomorrow have already been posted, and the whole cycle starts all over again. It goes on every day, 7 days a week. And at the end of the day, the reporter thinks about the story that he did today, and he worries about the one that he'll do tomorrow. And that's news to me. Henry Tenenbaum, Eyewitness News.
Good night, Henry.
Good night, Susan.
What happened? Forget it. It's ridiculous. How long is this?
Zero, man.
Hey, how long is this? I was told it was a minute.
Camera 1 tight on J.C.
News 7. News 7.
The mini camera.
Eyewitness News.
Exit Max's mic. 9, 8, 7. Stand by 4, color Max. 110.
Max on the phone.
Max on the phone. Is that film 2? 8,
7.
Welcome to television.
Dissolve film 2.
I want a decent story.
Breaking the White House. 5.
Roll 5, yeah.
4. 3.
Fade it out, and track tape 5.
How do we get the music? If we tape it off the projector.
Oh, stand by key.
Boy, that turned out to be a piece of
Pan over. Stand by, JC.
garbage.
It sure did. 30 seconds.
30 seconds, that's marvelous.
Camera 2, Max and JC. We have to make it difficult.
50, 20, okay.
Okay, next we're going to tape 2 with the music, and then the car run.
That's Eyewitness News. I'm Karen Walker.
Oh, shut on!
Eyewitness News.